Camp Hacker, bringing your world into focus. Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Camp Hacker. We have created and are dedicated to this podcast because we believe that staff training is one of, if not the most important part of your job as a camp director. Staff training is what prepares your staff to care for their kids, to feel confident in their skills, to do their jobs to the best of their ability, and to learn along the way. A well thought out and intentional staff training will help you in more ways than you can imagine. And we need to help each other bring our very best. So we're going to start out today by introducing ourselves. So, Ruby, I give it to you.
My name is Ruby Compton, and I'm the Chief Exploration Officer for Ruby Outdoors. I am in Western North Carolina, and I provide support to camp directors across North America in helping them accomplish all the tasks that need to get done and continuing to further the mission of camp.
Lovely. And Gabrielle.
And my name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Waro. And Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains of Quebec. And we focus creating a positive female environment while doing that both in French and English.
In case the first part wasn't tough enough for you. And I'm Beth Allison. I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. I was an executive director for 15 years of 5 children's summer camps in Ontario, Canada, and am now a consultant. And my passion is intentional leadership training. And if you've ever heard any of our podcasts, that is not a surprise to anybody. And of course, building solid and supportive community. So we're back after a very busy year of traveling and speaking and keynoting and teaching master classes. We are back and excited to really focus on podcasting for our 7th season. Hard to believe, although season six was a wee bit short, but we're back for full season.
It's all right. 7. Everything's all right.
So we're excited to be back. Our topic today, our very first topic as the summer is over, is, are you freaking kidding me? So these are the things that we cannot believe we've had to teach our staff over the summer. And Ruby is going to tell us why we chose this topic to start off our podcast season.
So I have a lot of friends that are camp directors. And when I say, how was your summer? All of them have had these moments where they're like, I had to teach my staff members to do this. And generally they came around and said, my staff were great. They were young and they just had a lot of skill deficits. And so as that came to be a theme, we thought it might be a fun topic to start off this season with.
Great. So where do we start? We thought we'd start out by sharing just a few of the things that surprised us personally, and also a few that other camp directors have shared with us. And once we've done that, once we've gotten through this list of funny things, we're going to get into what we can actually do about it. So please understand, we are not discussing this topic to make fun of our staff. We instead want to let folks know who are listening that they are not out there alone, and that lots of us have had these moments where we need to stop, take a breath, and then decide how we're going to teach something that we had assumed everybody knew already. So we'll get into what assuming gets us in a minute and how we can better set our staff up. But right now we're going to dive into some of these stories that we've heard or experienced this past summer. So Ruby, why don't you start us off with a few? What you got?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got 3 that I want to tell you about. So the first one is when you answer the phone, you have to sound pleasant lesson that it is surprising to me, how much people use phones. It's rare we actually take phone calls. And when you call camp, like, you don't want to hear, this is camp, what, hi, how are you? You are expecting it to be a relatively happy place with cheery people. Where you're like, oh, who is taking care of my children? So that was something that I was always surprised that I had to teach people how to do. And I end up calling camps a fair amount to coordinate logistics these days. And sometimes generally it's really good, but sometimes you get people on the phone, you're like, they do not sound happy about their life. So that's one. I'll tell you a training tip on that here in a little bit. Another one that's been really surprising to me is teaching people how to build a fire, and specifically how to light matches. that is one I've come across that I mean,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I remember being told like, don't ever play with matches, and
Right.
I learned how to build a fire
Mm-hmm.
when I was at summer camp as a kid. So that was really surprising to me when I was like sending staff out into the woods to do cookouts, and they would spend an hour and a half trying to start a fire and are asking for lighter fluid and charcoal. And I'm like, we have a lot of very flammable things. But okay, we need to do a fire lesson learned. And then one that came from a director friend of mine this summer was she discovered that a couple meals into the first session that her staff, their responsibility was to go around and serve food to the campers, and discovered that she didn't realize she needed to tell the staff they have to wait until there are plates on the table to serve food. So these moments they happen. I don't know.
Yes.
But I mean, next week or our next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about what is some of this, what is the culture that folks are coming from, and it might put some of this into context. And if you have folks that are always eating out of takeout containers and never sitting down to a meal, it could make sense. So those are the first three that came to mind for me.
Gab, what about you? Any funny things that you heard over the summer or experienced?
Yep. I reached out also to a couple of my friends. And so this is sort of a collective list. So how to be an active audience. One of my friends said that that people would get up on stage and have some fairly funny skits, and the audience, the staff, would just be deadpanned. And she realized, she asked afterwards, well, did you find this funny? And they're like, oh, that was such a great night. It was one of my favorite nights. And she realized that they didn't realize, cheering, laughter, smiles, head nods, very, very important. So she was teaching them how to be active audience members. I myself this year had an interview with a staff member, and we were trying to schedule her interview. And she said, I'll check to see if my parents, if they can drive me, what their schedule is like. And I live in Montreal. She also lives in Montreal, downtown Montreal, not at all on the outskirts. And so I told her, why don't you just take the metro? And she had never taken the metro before. And she was 19 years old, but her parents wouldn't allow her to take the metro. Montreal's a very safe city. So we took the metro together, because I said, before we do your interview, you, miss, are going to learn how to take the metro. And she was very excited about it. Her parents, I think, weren't very pleased, but that's okay. Life lessons, and she's an adult, so I don't have to deal with her parents. Another one that came out was, this has two things that have to do with days off. A friend of mine's staff members, this has been happening to her for a couple of seasons, where she's had to teach staff members how to use debit cards, so they would get paid, but they wouldn't know how to take money out.
Interesting.
So how to actually go take money out, how much to take out that would make sense. And to pair with that is also what to do on your day off. So some staff members would rather just not have a day off because they just don't know what to do with their time, causes a lot of anxiety. So helping staff members brainstorm what they can do on their day off was something that I've also had to do. This one came from a friend of mine who was confused why a staff member, and this happened twice this summer, why a staff member wouldn't go in the water with her kids. And it had to do with the fact that she had her period and she never used a tampon. She didn't force the staff member to go in the water, but then the staff member asked if she could help talk her through using a tampon. So that was something she wanted to do, but she had never done, and she was nervous to ask. So she said it didn't, in our conversation, she said, Gab, it didn't happen once, it happened twice, 2 staff members. So so that was a couple of those things. Also how to have a table conversation, and so that there's conversation at the table, and how to say I'm sorry. So that was something that a couple of I heard more than once from some of my camp director friends, that actually teaching staff members to just own up to something when you hurt somebody's feelings, just actually saying, my bad, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. That was an actual lesson that had to be taught. So there's of course a much longer list, but that's sort of the gist some of
the highlights.
Yeah, some of the highlights.
Nice, thank you. For me, one of the things that surprised me every year at our residential camp was the number of staff who did not know how to do laundry. And many had never worked a machine, let alone knew the importance of separating whites from darks. And more than once, I would arrive in the laundry room to see soap like overflowing everywhere, and the washing machine stuffed so full of clothes, there was actually no room for water. So laundry always surprised me. Um, if you are a camp that has machines and staff do their own laundry. A camp director here in Ontario, when I asked this question of some people, told me that he was really surprised at how many staff arrived just unprepared in terms of gear that they would need for a summer at residential camp. So they're there for the summer, they're not going home all the time, and they didn't come with rain jackets or flashlights or sandals or a water bottle, any of those things that for him as a director, he thought were really obvious. We heard from another one of our podcasters who let us know that he was very surprised that his staff didn't know how to stir paint. So in arts and crafts, they were very frustrated that the paint was so runny and it just kept coming out runny, and they weren't getting very good results with it, but they hadn't actually stirred it or shaken it or done anything like that since last summer. So he was just shocked at that. Also got a message from a camp director friend south of the border telling us that the person that he had hired to make sure that everything was set up for programs and meals, that was part of his job. I don't remember if he was a program director or what, but it didn't occur to him that you need like condiments or cutlery or all those kinds of things, all like ketchup and mustard or whatever for hot dog meal, that they all have to come out before the meal. And he says it's taken this staff member about 2 summers to actually get that all this stuff has to be done beforehand. One of our other podcasters, she let us know that her staff, she couldn't believe they didn't understand how to play. So we're not talking about the finer skills of leading games and facilitating, but this director said they just didn't know how to play, like have free play. And she found that because of that, they didn't get the value of free play or understand that sometimes kids just want to do that, likely because they didn't grow up experiencing themselves. And I just have 1 or 2 more. One was another director from the Chicago area sent us that this message that, excuse me. Okay, there we go. Not understanding the value of perhaps wearing a one-piece bathing suit for her female staff to avoid losing their tops in the water when they were playing with campers, and it happened on more than one occasion. So I am assuming they learned that lesson pretty quickly. But that I think probably falls under the right kind of gear to do the best job. So this director wasn't having problems with them wearing 2 pieces, just that in camp when you're having some fun time in the water and free swim, the top can come off all by itself. And another one said that knowing how to talk to parents, she was stunned that they didn't know how to give a handshake, that they didn't know how to look parents in the eye. So we're not even talking here about the kind of language they should be using when they're explaining something to a parent or maybe trying to diffuse a situation, or we're not even talking about getting down physically to the camper's eye level to have a good discussion. Those are skills I think that get taught at camp at leadership training, but these are really just basic human interaction skills. And when I asked Travis if he had any moments, he said he was always surprised when staff, and this didn't happen one year, I'm like all the time, they didn't know how to change a light bulb. And so he was always a bit flabbergasted at that. And my very last one is one that I noticed personally this year when I was doing some in-service training midsummer at a camp, and we were evaluating the first half of their summer. So they were evaluating it with me. And one concern that every small group came up with, almost at the top of everybody's list, was that everybody was late for everything. So every session, every meal, the cook was frustrated, the people running the programs were frustrated, the kids were frustrated because they were getting, run different places without people, giving them enough time to move and all that kinds of stuff. And at this particular camp, they did not allow cell phones in the vicinity of the campers. And so as they're telling me this story and everyone's agreeing and they're all saying, yes, it's terrible, I looked around the room and I noticed that a staff of 70 people, 3 of them wore a watch. Only 3. So again, they just weren't prepared with what they really need to do their jobs successfully and well. And I think it's because most of this generation of staff just uses their phones to tell the time. So that was interesting. And I'm sure that if we interviewed every director out there, we would find something from every camp that made us say this summer, are you freaking kidding me? And now what do we do about this? So we have a few suggestions of ways to handle some of these things. So Ruby, let's hear yours.
Yeah, so I often suggest, I think running scenarios is a great way to discover some of these skill deficits, because you can sit in a room all day long and say, this is how we're going to do all these things. And there are a lot of assumptions when you are teaching staff members about a meal, that they have a picture in their mind of how the meal is going to go, but that may be really different from the meals that they have experienced in their life. And so we have to be that much more aware of that. So yes, let's run a meal just like we would during camp. Let's do that during staff training and do it exactly the same way, so they can see that, yes, the plates need to be divvied out in front of each person before the staff member walks around with the serving dish and tries to serve them food, right? So with the phone call, I worked in an office where we had multiple lines, so I could dial from one office into the next one and make the phone ring. And so I would have it was primarily our leadership team who were answering the phones. I would have them sit in that room, and then I would dial in and be whatever crazy parent and who's bringing up whatever silly issue or not so silly issue, and test them on how to deal with it. And then we'd have a little bit of coaching afterwards. And they had the added pressure of, like, everybody else on the leadership team was sitting there watching them do that call, which is also pretty realistic, because our phones were in open spaces where you may be answering the phone and handling a parent concern while there are other people sitting there listening, talking, whatever. So they needed to start practicing that. And so, yeah, I think if we're running scenarios, I think that is a way that some of these things they may not know how to do are going to come to light before they're taking care of children and doing that. The other thing that I think is a really healthy habit, and I did this in lots of different ways, is to just simply ask, what training do you need? And so that is when my staff would say things like, I need some help talking to parents. I always feel awkward about it. So can we talk about how to do that? And so I would ask this question in lots of different ways. I would ask it during one-on-one evaluations, when they were sharing, about the things that they were doing well, things they weren't doing so well, things that, they were focusing on, goals that they had set. And that was always a question that I would ask is, what else do you need? What training do you feel like you're lacking? And I was also listening to those areas for improvement that folks were reporting and saying, wow, there's a theme. Everybody's talking about writing parent letters home, and they're feeling like they're underprepared to do it. So clearly we need to do a little training on that. We also asked on our end of session eval. So we had a piece of paperwork that all the staff, each staff member filled out to tell us about their session and to rate how things went. And that was another place we could ask, like, what do you still need? What training are you still looking for? What can we help you with? And that's going to give you some ideas when we just ask. They aren't always going to be able to articulate exactly what it is. They may not want to volunteer the information. They don't know how to build a fire. But if they go on a camp out and they can't cook their food because they can't build a fire, they're going to tell you. So if it's something that's really stressing them out, it may not be stressing you out yet, but if it's stressing them out, they'll probably tell you if you ask.
Great. Thank you. And setting up that kind of environment where that's normal for you to ask and them to share is, going to be key in that, of course. Gab, what about you? What are some thoughts you have to help with some of these "are you freaking kidding me" moments?
Sorry, my bad.
There you go.
I keep a journal by my bed at night, and journal is a loose word for scraps of paper beside my bed, and whatever pen or paper, pencil that I have. But to help me go to sleep, I write down the things that frustrated me that day, or as well as things that I need to remember for the next day. So it's something that I can just get off my chest, and it's on actually different pieces of paper. So things that frustrate me and my to-dos do not go on the same list. So then I can put that piece of paper away and never look at it again unless I need to address it. And then my to-dos are another piece of paper. And then at the end of the summer, not immediately, but once I've sort of, recuperated from the summer, I reread that list. Some of it I can throw out because it's not applicable as probably how I was feeling that day. And some of it, I can look at how I can put that into my staff training for the next year. And I think it's important, as we've talked about on Camp Code before, is not to pendulum swing and put all of your energy into, for example, active odd audience training, but just to add it in into a little piece of your training. This is what we expect when we're all listening to a play or a skit or a song from our staff, is to participate. And it's something that you've mentioned, or that you tell your staff the appropriate swim attire for next year, and you're very, very specific before they come to camp, or that everybody needs to come with a watch, and that your staff, that your camp store has extra watches for those that their watch, they lose it or gets broken, et cetera, et cetera. So to create that list. And then, like Ruby, I like to interview 2 groups after camp. So our first year staff members, including some of my young staff members and new to our camp, and then our veteran staff members. And it's the same question, which is, what do you wish you would have known before you came to camp? That's for our first year staff members. And for our veteran staff members, it's, what do you wish first year staff members and new staff members would have known? And a lot of time there is a crossover, and sometimes veteran staff say things that I actually didn't see all summer. I didn't realize that they didn't know they were doing this. I didn't realize that veteran staff members had to pick up a lot of the slack. So it helps me understand where we need to put our training and or front loading before staff members come to camp.
Nice. Thank you. And so smart, both of you. I think for me, many of these little freaking kidding me moments arrive for several reasons. I think Ruby's touched on one of them already, but for me, many of our campers and staff members today often don't have chores that they do at home. So unlike many of us who are older, my generation specifically, chores were an expected part of life when we were growing up. And this is where we learned to push a broom for the push brooms. It's where we learned to unclog a toilet. It's where we learned to put gas in the lawnmower. And many parents today feel that their kids have enough on their plates and they don't make learning these simple life skills a priority. And no judgment here, it's just how some kids are being raised. And so they just don't have the experience with a lot of things that for seasoned camp people seem like just common sense to us. So I think we have to keep that in mind. A lot of our staff members have had parents who, only because of their love and care for their child, haven't allowed them to make their own decisions, but have rather chosen to set them up for success by being what many of us would say is maybe too involved. So if staff have never had to figure things out for themselves, if they've never been taught or led by example that that's what's expected of us, we are to be problem solvers, it's so foreign to them to be dropped into an environment, particularly residential camp, where that environment is all they see sometimes for 2 months straight, that they straight up have never had to solve problems on their own, or even had that experience of trying to see the big picture and then figuring out the little steps that go into the big picture, like, for example, plates on the table before the food, because their parents have always had that big picture for them, like not allowing them to ride the metro or subway, for example. And for me, the third and final one is that even if they grew up in a house where they have had chores and responsibilities, or parents who encourage them to figure things out on their own, they may be new to us and they just don't yet know how it's specifically done at our camp. And we all know that most camps have very certain ways of doing things, and for very good reasons. So all of these issues can be solved, of course, by front loading. And I know that here we are in season 7, and I am still talking about front loading. But I'm going to do it every day until I have no breath left in me. But the importance of it to make our staff feel secure and ready for success and more confident in their responsibilities, and like they know what's going on, coupled with a lot less frustration on our end, make front loading one of our very best friends. And I think that it really behooves us all to walk our staff through as much as possible, not only before campers arrive, but also before staff arrive to live at camp or to be at camp every day. And since we know that people just don't read anymore, camp directors included, I think that we can use the great social media that we have at our fingertips to create really amazing short videos for our staff to help them prepare for all that they need to have a successful summer. And we want to explain why. I mean, this is so important to explain why it is we do it this way, and show them in some small way that this will make their interactions with campers or with each other so much easier. We are camp people, so we should make time to make them fun and creative, like literally showing them during a rainstorm why a raincoat and rubber boots are a great idea. So get out there and get wet and show them. You can certainly share this responsibility with other members of your leadership team or returning staff. I would be sure to keep them really short, like one little lesson per video. Keep them really positive, explain the why of it. You'll obviously get so much more buy-in if staff understand why we do things in a certain way at our camp. And have those movies, make sure they align with your mission. So if one of your things is that we don't make fun of anybody, none of your videos are going to make fun of people, right? You're aligning it with your mission, and that they're created in such a way that they show your staff that you care and that you are doing your best to set them up for their best summer ever. And I would send one of these out a day or every other day, like in the month leading up to camp. Or if you feel like there's stuff they need to know sooner than that, send them out. Create a great library of it. Get your return staff involved, as I suggested. And after they've been sent out, you can put them, in the staff section of your website so that everybody can see them. Parents, campers, donors, all those people. Because these videos would be just one more reason they want to send their kid to your camp, because look how organized and prepared and supportive you are. And I would also take the time to make it really clear before they ever get to camp which of these items you believe that they should come to camp with are mandatory. So like talk about it in your interviews, put it in their staff contracts, like they must come with a watch. As Gab said, we used to say that every year, and it was always hilarious how many staff went to Walmart on their day off between staff training and the first day of summer camp to buy that cheap watch that only lasted them the summer, but at least they had a watch. And then the important part is that Travis would get everyone to set their watches to the CBC 1 p.m. thing. So the CBC radio in Canada has this signal that goes off at 1 o'clock p.m. every day, and we all know it's exactly 1 o'clock. So all the watches were set for the same time at camp. Maybe they're required to have a headlamp or a flashlight, or they have to bring their own pens and books. Whatever it is, you need to make that really clear which ones are expected of you, and these we strongly recommend. You might want to have these to have a better summer. Hats off to Pierce Williams Camp in Ontario. They set their staff up with a special employee discount account with Columbia so that they could get discounts on great quality gear if they want to choose to purchase there. Obviously, they don't have to, but it was just a nice thing that they set up with Columbia so that their staff could take advantage of that if they wanted. And then, of course, as Ruby said, just have them practice these kinds of skills. So even having time during training for staff to practice things as simple as how do you get your campers to brush their teeth all at the same time? It allows you to sort of work out those kinks, and then allows you for the input of the really wise return staff who can then share all of their tips and tricks about how to make this easier. So just make sure that they have those kinds of experiences where even if you're talking about they don't know how to do free play, well, give them time to play every day. Do some, 10 minutes in between sessions, or give them bubbles and watch what happens when 20-year-olds get nothing but bubbles. I mean, it's an amazing experience, but give them a chance to do that. And my very last point, I think, would be to anoint your staff during training. So as training's winding down, have a moment when you have a ceremony. It can honestly be like 30 seconds long, but you get staff to like raise their hands and take an oath, or you bring like a king or queen in to like give the anointing, whatever it is. But they understand then that they have been given the power to make decisions and to use their critical thinking and to figure things out. So for example, I had a staff member who took about 6 weeks to tell me they didn't know how to build a fire. And I kind of found out the hard way through another staff member. So letting them know that you're giving them this power, and like make this little anointing fun or silly or creative, whatever you want, but let them know that they've been given permission to make decisions. And of course, if you do this near the end of training, they're already aware of all the exceptions to that rule. So they know the decisions that are for you, the director only, or for their section head only, or for the nurse only, or whatever systems your camp has in place. And we're going to dive into helping staff become decision makers in a future episode this season. So it's all I really want to say for now, but it's really imperative that they hear from you that you trust them and you expect them to be decision makers. So to help with all of these "are you freaking kidding me" moments, we hope that commiserating with other directors around North America has helped. But we also want to remind us all, so that we don't lose our minds, that when we're faced with these moments, we should think in terms of opportunities and solutions rather than problems and disappointment. So if we can shift our thinking, and I learned this from Gabrielle a long time ago, to "hooray, I love an opportunity to find a solution," from "good Lord, not another issue I have to fix and teach them," I think that will serve our people better and more than likely save most of our sanity for another summer. So those are some thoughts about that. Gab's going to do her famous recap, which we all love and is one of the favorite parts of our podcast. And then we'll talk a bit about how you can get involved. So Gabrielle, take it away.
I actually have maybe one more to add to the list.
Please,
is that okay?
please,
Yes,
of course.
So this year we did I've mentioned also, I think before on a podcast, but we did a hit list this year. So it's 100 items to try to do at camp during staff training. Mm-hmm. And some of it is things like stargazing with 2 other friends, but others are lighting a fire or teaching somebody to light a fire, teaching somebody to light matches. There's just a whole bunch of things. And then of course you're on teams, and you can be the individual, victor, or, so a hit list of 100 items, getting people stoked about trying these things, hiking up your local mountain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, in that hit list, we had pretty much all of the life skill things that we wanted our staff members to do. Or at least try, so that, and it was in a fun way. And I've also seen other camps do that in the form of a bingo card, or just a what would I like to learn a card, and create a list for staff. So it's not coming necessarily just from them. That can be a little bit daunting, and they can hand it in, and then maybe get a workshop with somebody else. So just creating a hit list. I think 100 is really cool because you can really pick and choose. And then making sure that there's some really cool fun things in there. But that was a really fun part of our staff training this summer. And then we created a secondary hit list to do throughout the summer. So it was a little bit of a different hit list, and we had a great time, but they were definitely trying the things that we really wanted them to try.
That's so awesome. That is so awesome.
And you will also get those staff members who are so competitive that they are going to go for all 100. Like they're just going to do it.
And
that's great.
Yes. And I thought, and we said, it's unlikely that you'd be able to get these 100s. The goal is that you try to do as many. Mm-hmm. And I think the word unlikely sparked something in some people.
Challenge accepted.
Yes. And some of the tasks were individual tasks. Some of them were group tasks. But it also was really great for during staff training, during those downtimes where people can start missing home. They were doing the hit list, and we would, regularly every morning would announce what was being done on the hit list. And if somebody did something on the hit list for the first time, we would do a big like ding 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 ding, first time, 5th time, 10th time. So then it wasn't just the people that were getting really far ahead if you got it to 5 things on that list. And also there was 10 items that everybody had to do and fit into their schedule. And so that was another piece of the hit list, but we didn't have to go after people. I thought we were going to have to check in and say, okay. And we really didn't. They just went for it. So that was a really fun part of our summer, this summer. Okay. For our recap this is our first recap for the season. So how exciting. I'm so excited. Okay, so I have taken over the 4 S's to talk about the "Are You Freaking Kidding Me?" Just a recap of the "Are You Freaking Kidding Me?" lists are now in S format. Stir paint, set up the table, say I'm sorry, and schedule following. So there you go, Beth.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Love it. To create a link that Beth said the word behooved, but she also talked about teach actual chores, why videos before staff members come to camp, use discounts, also bubbles. Those are very cool. Ruby talked about how-to scenarios and ask what they actually need. We could also interview our first-year staff members, veteran staff members, create your own "Are You Freaking Me?" list, and use a hit list or bingo card to make things fun. Also,
Great.
remember that this is normal. We're working with young people and some people that don't have these experiences. We are educators, and this is what we get to do. And if you are frustrated, you're not alone, but you are teaching them these really important life skills, and we thank you for that.
Excellent.
Well said,
Thank
well
you
said.
so much. And my English profs will be very happy that I used the word behooved.
I was really happy you used the word behooved.
Years later.
Behooved and bubbles.
Here's how you can get involved in the Camp Code podcast. So you can join us using Twitter, and our hashtag is, of course, Camp Code. And you can let us know the topics you might like us to discuss, any guests or experts you would recommend that we talk to, any great leadership training tips that you have to share with us, and I know there are hundreds of thousands of them out there. We would love to hear from you. We are all about sharing in this industry. It's one of the best parts of being in the camp industry, so please let us know. And if you have found our podcast to be useful, we'd love it if you could leave us a rating and a review in iTunes. And you can do that by going to camphacker.tv /cc_iTunes, or of course, just tweet your love of the show by going to camphacker.tv /campcodelove. And your feedback will help us keep our podcast going. And if you want to reach any of us individually, this is how you do it. Ruby.
You can reach me at ruby@rubyoutdoors.com. You can follow me on Instagram at rubyoutdoors or on Twitter, rubylyn85.
Excellent. Thank you. And Gab, if we want to get a hold of you.
Well, you can check me out on Gabrielle Rail on Instagram and Twitter. You can see where I work at waro.com, and you can get in touch with me at gabs@waro.com.
Perfect. Our website is gocamp.pro. You can email me at beth@gocamp.pro, or you can find me on Twitter using the hashtag TopazFaye, and Faye is spelled F-A-E. And it's all one word. And Ruby's going to tell us what our next podcast is going to be about.
So today we talked about some of the ways that our staff surprise us with what they know or don't know. And next week we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the habits they may be bringing to camp with them, and some of the culture that they are bringing with them because of the rest of the world and the way the rest of the world is. I think sometimes we get stuck in our little camp bubble and we forget that what happens at camp is not the way it happens in the rest of the world. So we'll talk about some strategies for handling that.
Sadly, it is not, but our goal is to make sure that it is at some point.
Exactly.
That's our goal.
Yeah.
Our final segment on each podcast, of course, is our best practice for leadership training. And again, we would love to hear some of your memorable moments or your most effective tips, and you can tell us what they are, again, using the hashtag Camp Code. But this week, we have a best practice coming from Ruby.
Can I show you something?
Please.
That's a phrase. That's my best practice, actually, is can I show you something?
That's awesome.
So I think that's a phrase that a lot of great leaders use. We are always looking for opportunities to teach. And I found myself saying that when I was a director to my leadership team members, and I'd say, hey, can I show you how the budget works? Or do you want to come sit in with me while I make this parent phone call just so you can hear what's going on? And it wasn't even necessarily that they were involved in the situation. I just have had a lot of mentors along the way that have put their arm around me and shown me stuff. And that gave me exposure and skills that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Flip side of that is I also want to encourage you to, anytime you're asking a staff member if they know how to do something, especially if it's at camp, then I would say something like, has anyone shown you how we set the table here at camp? Has anyone shown you how we organize the tools in the maintenance shed? Versus, do you know how to set the table here at camp? Do you know how to organize the tools? Because, and I am 100% guilty of this, when somebody says, do you know? And they're like, do you know this band? I'm like, yeah, totally. Absolutely. I have no idea. But I don't want to admit that. So when we say, has anyone shown you, or some iteration of that, then that puts the responsibility on the person with the knowledge, not the person that we're asking. And so it's a lot easier for them to say, no, actually, no one's shown me how to get to the dining hall. Can you take me there? So that's a strategy that I've taught a long time for when we are greeting parents and greeting new campers and greeting new staff. But this can also be used every day with your staff when you're asking them about knowledge that they may or may not have. has anybody shown you this?
I love that.
And it's so great. And Ruby, this year we purposely used that piece in our staff training, and we started it with our leadership team members, and we really, really practiced it when staff members came on to camp. We had to remind ourselves as leadership team members, remember, this is the sentence we want to use. And then our staff trickle in. So we taught each group of staff members that this is what we wanted to do. And by the time new staff members came on camp, the feedback that I got from some of the new staff members was that sentence actually came up. And it was really, really cool to hear. One of our staff members who was from New York, so she was coming to Quebec, Canada. It's English and French. There's a lot of culture that she was adjusting to. She found that sentence just made her feel welcomed and not, using her words, like an idiot. And she said she had never heard it anywhere. She had never heard it anywhere else used so intentionally. So it was definitely made an impact, and I think it really made our staff feel more welcomed. And I think it made also, on the flip side, made our staff be able to ask questions and say, oh, I haven't been showed how to do this yet. So I just want to say, out of experience, and we tried it this year, and it was a main point. It really made a difference. And then of course our staff did it with our campers, which was wonderful. So it's a wonderful sentence. Yeah, just a little, I didn't get to share that with you.
How do you say it in French?
Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui t'a montré ça?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, exactly. So just use that.
Yeah, great.
And I think too, so many of us are visual learners, and you feel more confident if someone's beside you and showing you something, rather than just you saying, you know, here's the plunger. I'm going to explain to you how to plunge a toilet. And then you're going to go down, you know, way down the other side of camp, and you're going to try to plunge a toilet. It's just easier if we can see someone do it. And then that person is also there. But I love the idea of flipping the onus onto us, that it's our responsibility to teach you, not your responsibility to run around and pick up all this information by yourself. I think that's a key piece to that.
Exactly. And I think that's something that was such a wonderful impact, was that piece. And for even when we were talking about before, how you're trying to teach staff members how to speak to parents. Has anybody showed you where the washrooms are? Has anybody showed you where your cabin is? That is that's a very important piece of speaking to parents. So for us, it was wonderful. We're going to be using this. This is part of our staff training for sure, for years to come at Waro.
Nice. Well, that wraps things up for today for our first podcast back in season 7. It's so nice to be back doing this with these two wonderful women and with you. So please don't forget to send your training tips our way. Pop us an email or reach out to us on Twitter. And thanks for listening, friends.